It is Saturday morning cartoons, and welcome to Sacramento, where it's going to be 101 degrees officially today. I got my walk in. Constance got her bike ride in before it got too hot. Anyway, welcome. Hope you're going to have a good weekend, everybody. I think it's pretty hot everywhere, pretty much everywhere in the most of the United States. Anyway, what I've got here is a book. Okay, and it's called Crowley on Christ. And for those of you familiar with the Thoth Tarot, this is the Prince of Cups on the cover. Why it's on the cover, I don't know. This is a pretty rare edition. It's long out of print. I just looked up on Amazon. There's one for sale. Looks in pretty good shape. It's a hardbound with a dust jacket and everything else, and it's for $535. I'm sure if you're a collector, it'd be nice to have that, but I'm not a collector. But over the years, people have been very generous, and especially among our lodge members that no, we can't afford Jack, and a very dear early Haru Raha Lodge member, Reverend Tom Saline, presented us to the lodge back in February of 1980. That's 45 years ago. Sadly, Reverend Thomas Saline has passed away many years ago, but he gave us this book. It's published by C.W. Daniels Company in England. It was purchased because he was a Bay Area guy originally. It was purchased at Shambhala Bookstore in Berkeley, and probably around 70 something probably. This is a 1975 edition. Um, it is, or it was, edited and introduced by Francis King, who also published a hardbound, beautiful edition of what he called The Secret Rituals of the OTO. That was also a C.W. Daniel book, at least the first edition of it. Anyway, I'm going to share because it's Saturday morning and cartoons and everything. This didn't start off as being called Crowley on Christ. It was called Crowley's essay was a gospel on Sir Bernard Shaw, the Gospel of Bernard Shaw, George Bernard Shaw. And here I'm going to sort of read the Genesis that Francis King penned a very nice introduction here. Where are we here? A few years back, a bunch of us were in Connecticut at a LibreOz Fest, and several of us drove down the road a piece to a lake in New Hampshire, a lake where Crowley had what he called a magical retirement there, and by the lake, and it was there that he stayed at a cabin, which is more than a cabin. It's a beautiful home. We had our picture taken out in front of it. Uh, that belonged to the great famous celebrity astrologer of the period, uh, Evangeline Adams. Now, she wrote the first world popular book on astrology. She literally brought astrology to the U.S. In the first part of the 20th century. And she was busted for fortune telling in New York, and she drew up the astrological chart for the judge's son, I think, son or daughter, and it was so insightful that blew the judge away, and she was acquitted. And but come to find out, years and years later, a fact that was admitted by her estate and graciously legally acknowledged, that Aleister Crowley wrote much of her. He ghost wrote Your Place in the Stars, Astrology, Your Place in the Stars, which made Evangeline Adams famous. And he wrote it at her cabin in New Hampshire. Here's a little something that Francis King said. One of those few who did take interest in Crowley and his magic was a woman who owned a cottage in New Hampshire. Now, why back in the early 1970s Francis King didn't want to name her by name, but obviously he had his reasons. A woman who owned a cottage in New Hampshire, and it was to this cottage that Crowley went in June of 1916 for what he called, quote, a greater magical retirement, unquote. In the 6th volume of his Confessions, Crowley told of many of the wonders that happened to him in the course of his retirement. And there was a ball lightning experience. Now, ball lightning doesn't have to be a big supernatural thing. Okay. One of the books Crowley had with him in his cottage home was Bernard Shaw's play Androcles and the Lion. As with all of Shaw's plays, a lengthy preface was attached to its published version. In the case of Androcles and the Lion, this preface outlined Shaw's interpretation of the life of Jesus Christ. His views infuriated Crowley, who, although he was bitterly anti-Christian, or at least that's how Francis King is characterizing him here. Remember, it's him, not Crowley talking. Who, although he was bitterly anti-Christian, was so well acquainted with the authorized version of the Old and New Testament that he knew large parts of it by heart. By their reliance on a highly selective use of texts and by their incompatibility with the real nature of Oriental religion, life, and thought. Consequently, Crowley decided to write a brief essay attacking Shaw's views. At first, he intended this essay to be no more than a destructive critique, but as he wrote on, the work became transformed into a detailed, intensely readable, and most amusing life of Christ, of the Gospels, and of Christianity itself. Thus, the Gospel according to Saint Bernard Shaw, as Crowley originally titled his essay, became the definitive study of the Orthodox religion of Europe and North America from the point of view of Crowleyan magic. Now, doesn't that sound like something that you'd get a kick out of? And Crowley was dashing this off at the same time he was writing the world's most famous book on astrology for somebody else. Okay. I love old books, and I get them, from strange sources like Reverend Tom Saline. But I just now found this note scratched on this piece of paper, and it must be Tom's note from, maybe and it's a dream. I found an old book of Crowley, first edition. It was about 5 by 5. Its cover was old and torn in spots. An inside cover was torn as if someone had separated the cardboard. I don't know, it goes on, mentions me in it. But I digress. I'm just going to read one little tidbit, one little bonbon, one little appetizer from Crowley on Christ, and it's well into it. It's well past 3/4 through, where he talks about the lesser mysteries of the story of Jesus. Okay. So he itemizes the lesser mysteries. The virgin birth. Practically all heroes of antiquity were said to be born of divine fathers, or occasionally of divine mothers. Hercules was the son of Zeus, who made the night last 48 hours in order to mak Siccar. Your guess is as good as mine, and you probably know what MAK, in parentheses, SICCR is. So I'm not that familiar with the legend of Hercules or Heracles, but he made the night last 48 hours to probably get some work done. Okay. Romulus and Remus were sons of Mars, Alexander of Apollo, and so on. More definite demigods than these were equally fortunate in their parentage. Nana, the mother of Attis, conceived miraculously without the commerce with a male. But we wish to call very particular attention to the story of Dionysus. Semele, that's his mother, who was a nymph. She wasn't a god, but she was a nymph. Semele became pregnant by Zeus in the form of a lightning flash. Hera, a name curiously like Herod, sought to destroy the child, but Zeus hid it in his thigh, to use the scriptural expression. What you got there? Are you happy to see me, or no? Is that a little god in your thigh, or are you just happy to see me? Now, a flash of lightning is, quote, divine fire. We read in Acts 2:3-4 that there appeared unto them cloven tongues like of fire, and it sat upon each of them, and they were filled with the Holy Ghost. Now, that's a Pentecost thing, okay? This symbolism is no accident. The Hebrew letter Shin is shaped like a triple flame. It means a tooth. Its numerical value is 300, which is identical with that of the words Ruach Elohim, the Spirit of God, or of the gods. Elohim is a plural. Now, the same Jesus, or Yeshua, in Hebrew is spelt by placing this letter Shin in the midst of the 4 letters of the name Jehovah, and represents the mitigation of that terrible deity by the influence of the Spirit. Hence, Jesus is also made equivalent to Joshua, Savior, for he shall save his people from their sins. To put this story in dramatic form, it is then only necessary to represent a virgin as impregnated by this flame of fire. There is here no space to pursue the significance of the name Mary, connected with Mar, the sea, and thus making the nativity the result of a mystic wedding of fire with water. Volumes have been written on the subject, as we all know, in 1916. Okay. The second mystery, the flight into Egypt. Egypt in Hebrew symbolism nearly always means darkness. And now we see the flight as symbolized of hiding of the seed in the earth, thus saving it from the terrible forces of winter. Lesser mystery number 3, the baptism of Jesus. Omitting any elaborate analysis of the symbolism of the name John, we only have to point out that the marriage of fire and water, sun and rain that conspire to the growth of corn and wine is for John 1:32. We read, quote, "And John bare record, saying, I saw the Spirit descending from heaven like a dove, and it abode upon him." The dove is the common symbol of the creative force, both male and female. I'm going to digress just for a second. When we see, contemplate, meditate upon the classic symbol represented as the lamen used by the OTO, the eye in the triangle over a descending dove that has the host in its mouth hovering over the Holy Grail. The dove is a common symbol of the creative force, both male and female. This was later symbolized in initiation ceremonies and the like by purification by water and consecration by fire. They go together. Before man could enter the temple, he had to be purified and consecrated. That is, become the neophyte, newborn, or the hero of the mysteries therein celebrated. Okay. The fourth lesser mystery, the hailing. And this is taken from John 1:47 through 49. Jesus saw Nathanael coming to him and saith of him, Behold, an Israelite indeed, in whom is no guile. Nathanael said unto him, Whence knowest thou me? Jesus answered and said unto him, Before that Philip called thee, when thou wast under that fig tree, I saw thee. Nathanael answered and saith unto him, Rabbi, thou art the Son of God, thou art the King of Israel. Here we see the hero proclaimed as King and God. I'd like to remind us that Jesus never referred to himself as the Son of God. Nathanael did that. Okay. Uh, uh, Here we see the hero proclaimed as king and god, just as in the carnival today, the carnival of fools. Okay. Uh, just as in the rites of Osiris and Saturn and Marduk and Tezcatlipoca. Three. Let me spell it. I'll be fair. Tezcatlipoca. 3,000 years ago, just as in those of every nature god, almost without exception. The intended victim must be identified as the king god formally by his being acknowledged as such by some person of importance. John 2 and various disciples make this acknowledgement, and no one who does not do so is mentioned. Okay, now this one's my favorite, and this is where we'll stop today, because it is the central or a central scene in my book, An Accidental Christ, which incidentally is now officially out of print. The book that's titled An Accidental Christ. It will next year be out with another publisher and in a new beautiful edition. I'm hoping it's the publisher Schiffer that does those beautiful coffee table books and things. So it will be out back to its original title, Accidental Christ. So anyway, the miracle of Cana. Dionysus reappears. The first miracle done by Jesus was the turning of water into wine, which is exactly what Dionysus does. The vine is the alchemist that transmutes the rain of heaven into the juice of the grape. And Jesus said, I am the vine. John writes in John 2:11, this beginning of miracles did Jesus in Cana of Galilee, and manifested forth his glory, and his disciples believed on him. I'd like to point out that nobody believed on him in that way. He wasn't on the map. He wasn't even in the penny saver until that miracle. He had students, he had followers, but nobody believed on him until the water and the wine. And that's why it's such an important chapter in my book. Okay. And manifested his glory, and his disciples believed on him. It is certainly an excellent reason. Now, in John's Gospel, which in many ways is best for our purpose, save there is no mention of the virgin birth in John. Okay? This miracle is immediately followed by the cleansing of the temple. The cleansing of the temple. John 2:13 through 15. And the Jews' Passover was at hand, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem and found in the temple those that sold oxen and sheep and dove, and the changers of money sitting. In other words, you had to use temple money to buy your sacrificial animal. Couldn't use just regular money. Okay. And then they took a profit off of changing the money back and forth. They were middlemen in a religious rite for profit. With this, we must, let's see, that sold oxen and sheep and dove and the changers of money sitting. With this, we must compare the mysteries of Attis, which is really big. I don't know why, but it was very big, where the priests, in their excitement, they would castrate themselves. What people did before television. With this, we must compare the mysteries of Attis, where the priests, in their excitement, would dash through the town, lashing everybody with whips, and in some cases, the very knives with which they had just used to mutilate themselves, none daring to resist them. There may be some connection with the use of the flail in the threshing, or more likely, the waving of the whip is a symbol of the motion of reaping. But I only offer this conjecture. The reader will agree that it is hardly probable that the merchants in the temple, a numerous body of persons surrounded by active slaves of great physical strength, would have permitted a single armed man with only a scourge of small cords to drive them all out. As a history, the story is absurd. As part of a sacred custom, it falls into line at once. Just in the same way, one would instantly knock down a man who threw paper at one on the street, but at Mardi Gras, one only laughs and throws a lot more back, or those beads. And we see immediately the close connection of this rite and the scourging of the people with the great central mystery of the whole life of God. The very next verse explains Jesus does these things for a very good reason. Oh, I'll go on a little more, because it's the seventh lesser mystery, the prophecy of death and resurrection. John 2:18 through 21. When answered, the Jews said unto him, What sign showest thou unto us, seeing that thou dost these things? Jesus answered and said unto them, Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up. Then said the Jews, 46 years was this temple in building, and thou wouldst rear it up in 3 days? Now, there's no connection at all between the scourging and the sign. No sign is given, no excuse made. But if we take it symbolically as part of a ritual, it all becomes clear. Why do you whip these people? That's what they were, in essence, saying. I am the God who is to die and rise again. It's a sufficient answer. And it's all part of the play. The temple cannot be destroyed and raised up until the other part of the formula has been fulfilled. I cannot go into the whole history of flagellation, that most popular of British sports, but beside the explanation offered above, there is that of the hecas est bebeloi. Est bebeloi. Apopantos. Get away from this, you profane. Okay. Hecas est bebeloi. The warning of the profane to depart from the vicinity. In New Guinea, a bull roar is whirled around the head, and all uninitiate flee from the sound. This seems to be the most probable explanation if, uh, if the other be rejected. Okay, and I'm just going to, because he has a summary of the things here. At a moment's pause, let's go over these points again. We have 1, a birth. 2, hiding in darkness. 3, baptism with water and fire. 4, hailing, thrice repeated. There's Nathan and others, or Nathaniel. A supper where water becomes wine. A scourging, death and resurrection fulfilled. Now, all this occurs on the very first appearance of Jesus. For in John 1 and 2, hey, they're missing. The baptism takes place then the next day, quote, the next day after, in John 1. John and 2 disciples proclaiming King and God. The day following, Philip and Nathanael follow suit. The third day, there's a marriage and Jesus makes wine. Then after not many days, as soon, in fact, as, quote, the Jews' Passover was at hand, comes the final scene. There are therefore 7 incidents in John's ritual: baptism, first hailing, second hailing, third hailing, the making of wine, the scourging, and the prophecy of death. Okay, he goes on to the greater mysteries and things too. You can see that Crowley was having great fun, and that he knew his Bible backwards and forwards. And much of what he was scrawling was also an attempt to out-thump the pitiful thumping that he expected. He was hearing from Bernard Shaw. Okay, so in a sense, he was, I'm going to overwhelm you with Bible talk. Okay. Anyway, it is a wonderful text. I don't recommend that you spend $530 some for the last remaining hardbound edition of this. I'm probably sure you could, if you're tenacious enough, you could probably Google around and get a PDF of the whole thing somewhere. Anyway, my thanks to Francis King for giving this book to us nearly 50 years ago. And that's it. It's sort of like for Sunday school. I may have to dig up a little bit more tomorrow for Sunday school. Who knows? Oh, shit. I've gone way over. Let's get on with our weekend. If you're anywhere near me, try to stay cool. Don't drink too much coffee. Don't drink much alcohol. I'm sorry, it's the weekend, but when it's 105 degrees, just drink a lot of liquids and electrolytes and things like that. Just stick around the house and read the next chapter of The Tarot Architect. Do a few of the exercises. Paint a couple of the cards. Thought you'd get away with that. Okay. Until tomorrow, continue to be good to yourself, be good to each other. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love under will.